and we're ready to start the webinar. Well, welcome to this ENSMOV Plus webinar, transport, and we called it untapped potential or too difficult to handle. And maybe some of you have the same feeling when talking about the transport sector and Article 7/8 of the EED. Let's just have a look at today's agenda. We will have 3 presentations. So the first one is a kind of interpretative presentation, but also putting this into practice by Sam Thomas from REP. And then we will have 2 country examples, one from Croatia, from Vesna Bukarica, and one from Hungary, from Armin Bohm. And both of these presentations will be about how transport measures fit into Article 7/8 implementation, maybe what the challenges are, and also what good solutions these member states came up with. And in the end, we would also like to reserve enough time for discussion and wrap up. So I think after the presentations, I would like to limit the questions to immediate questions of understanding. And then after all the 3 presentations, when we have the whole picture, we will have more time for more in-depth discussions. Well, who are we? I think it's also good to just give you a short overview of what the ENSMOV Plus project is. It's an EU-funded project. We have 14 partners from 12 countries, and we have a mix of public authorities, agencies, energy agencies, associations, and research associations, organizations, and think tanks. So we have a quite good mix of, let's say, a more research-based approach and implementation approach. Our topic, our goal is to support member states in Article 7/8 implementation, and that's also where our target groups then come from. It's public authorities, but also other stakeholders that can play a role, especially if you look at energy efficiency obligation schemes. We also cover the whole policy cycle. So we start from the design of policies. We have a look into the design of policies. We have a look into issues of implementation, monitoring, verification, and the evaluation, which then leads again to the redesign of policies. And how do we do that? We do that by different channels, by different tools. It can be policy briefs, but also events like the one today, webinars, conferences. And well, if you want to see what the project delivers, then go to Energy Savings Policies EU. This is the side of the project. Why is it not ENSMOV Plus? Maybe because this project actually builds up on a lot of pre-projects that have been done on this issue. And would also like to make one announcement. I cannot tell you the concrete date, to be honest, but we also have on our site a part on where you can look into countries' implementations of Article 7/8. And we are now in the course of preparing an updated overview of the most important measures that are used in the countries to implement Article 7/8. So these are the snapshots, both of energy efficiency obligation schemes and alternative measures. And yeah, we hope to finish them soon and can be able to put them online. So I would like to end this very short introduction, but before giving the floor to my 3 colleagues, I would like to have also some thoughts on the transport sector and maybe give some inputs already in the beginning. We in the Austrian Energy Agency, we were in charge of monitoring of Article 7 or the whole ED actually for between 2014 and 2020. And we also made some experiences with the transport sector. And I think one issue there, and maybe you can relate to that, is with the transport sector, we really had one big challenge that was the different departments usually transport is allocated in different departments, but that's not the most important challenge. I think also was really a different way of thinking what savings are, why you are implementing a policy, what the reasons are, what your targets of a policy are. So it took us a lot of time to even understand each other, let's say, the transport and in the energy world. We in Austria in the past period, 2014 to 20, had, let's say, standard transport measures, I would say like taxes or tolls. But beyond these measures, and I think this would be a goal to go beyond these standard cross-cutting measures, it was very difficult to come up with a standardized approach of calculating energy savings from policies. So for us, it was often in a very individual way. And when calculating the savings, it was, again, this different way of thinking. It took us quite some time to translate the, let's say, the transport language into the energy language back and forth. And these were really challenges in Austrian Article 7.8 implementation. Having made this short observation from my experience in the past decade, let's say, I would like to start this webinar, and I would like to ask Sam Thomas from the Regulatory Assistance Project to make his presentation on the interpretive note of the Commission. Dear Sam, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Gregor. So are you seeing the right screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, look, I'll be touching on the guidance note, but I guess really the main focus of my presentation is on the additionality of transport savings, particularly when you're looking at policy measures that look to increase the take-up of efficient vehicles that are also covered by the EU new vehicle CO2 regulations. So that's the real crux of the issue with respect to additionality that I'll be looking at, and I'll look at a couple of different approaches. One set out in the Commission guidance from back in 2019, and another one from 2023, also by an EU-funded project, StreamSave, which takes a different approach. But preceding that, I'm just going to give a little bit of an introduction to the transport measures that have been reported to the EED energy savings obligation to provide a little bit of context. So here we go. So this is basically just what I said. Different types of transport measures, the overview of how they've been reported and the savings that have been reported for those measures, and then a look at the additionality of transport measures and different approaches for calculating the energy savings. So what are the different types of transport measures that are being reported or not under the EED energy savings obligation? Well, I think we can kind of split them into three categories, and this avoid, shift, improve diagram is a classic way of categorizing policies in the transport sector, and it's used in the transport sector quite a lot. It's like a hierarchy. So at the bottom there, you've got improve, and here you've got things that improve the technical performance of different types of transport modes. So things that improve the efficiency of the stock of vehicles, things that improve the efficiency of different types of like rail transport or bus transport, but also improvements in the way people use those technologies. So this might be a behavioral measure like eco driving, or it might be a behavioral measure that is a little bit more technical. So it's persuading people to change aspects of their vehicle more regularly, or check that the vehicle is working well. So the tire pressure type of measures. Then you've got the shift type of options. So these are the ones where you're looking to shift from a less efficient to a more efficient mode of transport. And so here you've got things that make one particular, the more efficient mode more attractive to people. So you've maybe changed You've got some public transport subsidy measures, and we see that in quite a few member states. You might be trying to look to improve the infrastructure so that, or provide incentives for people to cycle to work as opposed to using a more energy intensive mode of transport. You might be looking to sort of improve the attractiveness of the public transport system as a whole by densifying it, or investing in new high-speed railways, for example. And we have examples of all of those types of measures that have been reported under the EED energy savings obligation. And then at the top of the tree, you've got the sort of more systemic approaches. So things like integrated land use planning, which basically reduces the need for people to travel if the services that you need to access are closer to where you live, including perhaps your work, perhaps more kind of lifestyle changes. So here we're kind of into the sort of sufficiency way of looking at the world. And I've put taxation at the top, but taxation kind of cuts across all of these three, because if you think about it, if you change the prices that people are facing for the fuels that are used, then you're going to have incentives for people to, well, if you make, let's say, diesel and petrol more expensive, then there are incentives for people to just travel less. There's incentives for people to move to a mode of transport that isn't affected by that taxation. And there's also incentives for both manufacturers and people to improve the efficiency of the equipment that they're using, or to engage in eco-driving, etc. So we've got all of these three different types. The ones here, the vehicle replacement incentives and kind of taxation measures, particularly taxation related to vehicle purchases and vehicle registration, are the types of measures we're going to look at when it comes to additionality later in the presentation. But what are people, what are the countries actually reporting? So we have, this is the split, the number of measures across the NECPRs that are reported in 2023. So these are policy measures with savings in 2021. And you can see that, well, transport has got, you know, a reasonable share of the reported measures. And then there are some cross-cutting measures as well that include transport. But then when you look at the, excuse me, here we go. If you look at the actual savings from these measures, we can see that the transport measures actually are only getting 10 to 12% of the overall savings. So even though there are quite a few of them, they're not really making a big impact on the savings, at least reported in 2021. And of course, the big change here is that the cross-cutting measures are delivering a lot. And they may or may not include transport. It's not always clear exactly which sectors the cross-cutting measures are targeting. So let's just unpick the transport measures and the cross-cutting, including transport, with a little donut chart. And you can see that the split between those two is roughly 5-1. So those cross-cutting, the cross-cutting wedge is a lot bigger than the transport wedge. And then we look at the policies that are being reported under those wedges. We can see that taxation is the biggest proportion. That's mostly cross-cutting, although some of the taxation measures are transport only. Then there are the energy efficiency obligation schemes. And as far as we know from the information we have available to us, these are mostly not targeting transport measures, but some are. And you know, many of the EEOs do have transport measures available to obligated parties, but generally they're not used to a great extent. And then at the top there, we've got some other policy measures, quite small, and subsidies, 11%. Now, the subsidies might only be a small proportion of the 2021 savings, but if you think about it, when it comes to 2030, those subsidies are likely to have 10-year lifetimes, whereas the taxation measures are likely to have just 1 year if you're just looking at short-run elasticities, perhaps a little bit more if that's your only measure in the transport sector, and you're also getting some shift and improve from your taxation measure. But if we were to think about the savings that you're going to get by 2030, then those subsidies do become quite important, and that is going to be the subject of the rest of my presentation when we look at additionality, particularly for electric vehicle purchase support. So let's think about what the new vehicle CO2 standards are, the regulations at the EU level. and why they're so important. Well, here we can see how the manufacturers must meet these targets over time. So there's some stepwise downward pressure on vehicle manufacturers to sell less carbon intense vehicles, but the extent to which that carbon is actually quite a good proxy for energy when it comes to intensity of vehicles, particularly when you're talking about internal combustion engine vehicles. So the manufacturers, they basically have to meet these targets, and the targets aren't on each individual vehicle, they're fleet average, and they apply across the EU and also in the European Economic Area countries of Norway, Liechtenstein, and Iceland. So essentially the manufacturers must meet these standards. That's the law, whether or not member states put in place subsidy programs or preferential taxation arrangements for different vehicle type purchases. So the key questions here with respect to additionality are, do member state policy measures actually make any difference to outcomes at the EU level? And here, this is kind of, it's partly a philosophical question. On one level, given the manufacturers must meet their targets, one could say that if a country subsidizes vehicles in their country, well, the manufacturers, they may well sell more electric vehicles in the country that's subsidizing them, but it allows them to sell more polluting vehicles elsewhere in the European Union, and the European Economic Area, to compensate. We call this the waterbed effect. So while that is a real effect, the question is it actually happening? And there are many different arguments here. So one argument would be, well, these standards were only set on the assumption that member states would put in place national policy measures to help the manufacturers meet their targets. Another set of arguments would be around the extent to which the standards are actually binding. Back in the past, in the 2010s, it seemed that the standards weren't particularly strict. So in fact, a subsidy program would have an additional effect to the new vehicle CO2 standards. However, in a situation where the vehicle standards are binding, and that's the thing that is really driving manufacturers' actions, well, in this case, the member states' policies are only just making it easier for the for the manufacturers to meet their targets. So you can see there are kind of some philosophical questions, and then there are some sort of empirical questions that you only know the answer to after the event. You only know really whether the vehicle standards were the binding measure or not later, once you've done an evaluation. So, but even if the answer is no, so the waterbed effect dominates, and that basically member states' policy measures don't make any impact on the overall EU level emissions and energy being used in this part of the transport sector. There's another question about whether impacts at national level can be counted as additional. And here the arguments are around the boundaries of the Article 8 Energy Efficiency Directive obligation versus the boundaries of an EU-wide scheme like the new vehicle CO2 regulations. And well, that's more of a kind of a legal question. I don't know the answer to that question, but there are different arguments here that you should be able to look at national impacts separately from what happens in the wider EU as a result of the waterbed effect. But so then, even if the answer to that second question is yes, so you can count savings at the national level, there's another question, which is how would you actually go about calculating those energy savings when you have this fleet average target? And the StreamSave project looked into this question. And you can see they basically produced an equation which can be used to broadly work out what the savings are from your policy measure. So here we can see that the equation is that your total final energy savings, the left-hand side variable, is dependent on the thing in the red box here. This is the difference between two different types of vehicles. So the efficient vehicle and some kind of reference vehicle. And then you're going to multiply that by the kilometers that the vehicle is used for. This is a passenger vehicle. The number of vehicles affected, and then multiplied by some kind of behavioral factor that could be itself, could itself consist of a number of other factors. But this is basically the setup. And the bits in the red box here, the difference between the two different types of vehicles are the crucial assumptions when it comes to the difference between those two ways of looking at the world. One is looking at the national level. So here, the reference vehicle, and it's important to remember that if you have an early replacement scheme, that's a bit different from where you're just trying to persuade people to make a different purchase when they were going to purchase a vehicle anyway. So if you're persuading people to get rid of their vehicles earlier than they would have, so kind of like a vehicle scrappage scheme, for example, then your reference vehicle is going to be that vehicle that's replaced. And I guess that's less interesting. The more interesting thing here is when the reference vehicle is the vehicle that they would have purchased anyway without the policy measure, given that they were going to buy a new vehicle. And here, well, the national approach might take the market average for the fuel type in the class of vehicle that they would have purchased. And this is the way the StreamSave project looks at it. And then the efficient vehicle, the vehicle purchased, is the comparator vehicle. And then the impact is that the difference between the purchased and the average technology available on the market is what goes into that equation. And the rationale behind this approach is essentially that Article 8 is about the member state final energy consumption. And if you look at those philosophical kind of arguments that I was describing earlier, without that national policy support, manufacturers would not meet their targets. So essentially, you're saying the national policy measure is making a difference, and what you're going to do is you're going to use the market average for the fuel type in class and compare it with the vehicles that have been purchased. And the other way of looking at it, this kind of EU-wide approach, which was the one that was in the guidance note back in 2019, is, again, for a reference vehicle that's being replaced early, it's the same thing. But when you're looking at the difference between the efficient vehicle and the reference vehicle for a purchase that was going to take place anyway, you're basically comparing the same two vehicles. There's no effect because of this waterbed effect. So basically, your member state policy is being fully offset unless you're making an early replacement. And the rationale here is that the manufacturers must meet their targets. It's the law, and the national policy measures just make it easier for them. So, they don't have to reduce their prices for electric vehicles as much as they would have done. So those are the two different approaches. There are some other important considerations, though, when you're thinking about how to calculate the savings from your policy measure. So one is the number of efficient vehicles purchased. So, and this really is a kind of wider policy evaluation question. So, without your policy measure, maybe some of those vehicles would have been bought anyway. And here, well, yeah, you might want to do an evaluation, and here we can see an evaluation from Norway, which is is a market that developed earlier than others. So there's a really good set of data available. And if we look at this, we can see that at the top there, this is battery electric vehicles. We can see after they've controlled for a whole bunch of other stuff, they see that essentially the elasticity of demand for battery electric vehicles is almost exactly -1. So this means that if your policy measure is decreasing the price of battery electric vehicles by, say, 10%, then the amount of battery electric vehicles purchased is increasing by 10%. So once you've controlled for all those other kind of variables, you're finding that the impact on the number of vehicles purchased can be calculated if you have access to all that kind of vehicle registration data. And most countries do have access to vehicle registration data because they collect it as a matter of course for many reasons. So obviously you need a good data set to work out what these elasticities look like, but actually going back to the Norwegian example is quite a good way for member states to think about what the impact of a subsidy program or a preferential taxation arrangement might have if they were to introduce it in their country. So that's and of course, this is basically a plug for evaluation. It's really important to do policy evaluation, not just because it's going to help you to understand what energy savings you've made and then can report them accurately to the Commission under the EED energy savings obligation. But it can also really help you to work out whether your policy measure is going to be providing better value, good value for money for your government and indeed your taxpayers. Just a couple of other things before I finish up. So coming back to this equation, are there other ways in which, even if you were to accept that you can't make energy savings from just straightforward vehicle subsidy programs because of this waterbed effect, are there other savings that can be made beyond what the EU new vehicle CO2 standards are delivering? And the answer to that is yes. And the first one to look at is, again, this box here, this difference between the two types of vehicle, the reference vehicle and the efficient vehicle. So tax or subsidy rates or annual registration fees that are graded by weight can encourage the purchase of lighter or smaller vehicles that use less energy and indeed have fewer local pollution impacts. We know that heavy vehicles churn up roads and create particulate pollution locally. And this is particularly relevant here because it's also true with electric vehicles, which can be very heavy with very heavy batteries. And in the context of the new vehicle CO2 regulations, which do not distinguish between different weights of electric vehicles because they're all assumed to have zero emissions, because they do have zero direct emissions, at least from the tailpipe. So while a heavier internal combustion engine vehicle will also have more emissions and will therefore increase or will be bad for manufacturers who are trying to meet their targets. If they're selling heavy, like SUV electric vehicles, that won't have any impact on their inability to meet those manufacturers' targets. So if you have a policy measure that does grade the taxation on vehicles by weight, you are going to make some energy savings, and this might be a good way of securing them. Another area, if we look at this part of the equation, so this is the amount of kilometers traveled by vehicles. Now, again, the EU new vehicle CO2 regulations, they don't differentiate between who's purchasing the vehicles. And you can imagine that if you had a policy measure that was focused on the types of people that drive a lot for reasons that are very good, like a taxi fleet, or maybe a corporate fleet of vehicles which requires a lot of travel. If you can focus the purchase of the energy efficient vehicles amongst this group, then you're going to be increasing this part of the equation. And again, that's not going to be, that's definitely going to be additional to the new vehicle CO2 standards. And then the final area is this behavioral effect. So I'm not focusing on the rebound effect here. I'm talking about the way in which vehicles are driven. And we know that electric vehicles can be driven in a slightly different way to internal combustion engines, particularly as anyone's been in an EV, the acceleration is quite dramatic. But of course, that's the bit that uses the most energy. So focusing on eco driving, for example, in electric vehicles could be a useful policy measure that member states might want to put in place in order to save energy. So there we are. That's a quick run through of the issues surrounding additionality. I presented two ways of looking at this thing, kind of two philosophical ways, and I'm not saying which one's best, and then presented some ways in which you might be able to both improve the estimates that you're submitting to the Commission through your NECPRs, and some ways, some focuses that you might want to look at if you want to make savings, particularly amongst electric vehicles that go beyond simply the difference between the reference vehicle and the efficient vehicle. And with that, I'm going to come to an end. Hope it wasn't too technical. And we're going to move on to find out how member states have been implementing measures in the transport sector. Thanks very much.
Dear Sam, thank you very much. What I forgot to say before is, so if you have more detailed questions or inputs, maybe you are welcome to put them into the chat. This also would make it easier for me to just overview the comments and maybe cluster a little bit afterwards for the presentation. So if you have discussion points, please put them into the chat. But if you have immediate questions to Sam, I think we could have one or two if they are very short and they're just based on very quick understanding. If we have more detailed points, we would save them for the end of this webinar. So as I do not see a raised hand, I would say that everything, although it was quite a lot of options presented, everything was clear. So thank you very much, Sam. And I would like to give the floor now to the first country example, which is from Croatia. And please, Vesna, share your screen, start your presentation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Gregor, and good morning, everyone. Just please, if you could confirm that you see my presentation right now.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Then I will start, and I will very briefly lead you through a support program for electric vehicles in Croatia. Which has been in place, well, I would say for the last a little bit less than 10 years with, of course, some modifications and and some updates. But let's first start with the why transport or why focusing on transport in Croatia. Yeah, the answer is the simple fact that the energy consumption and the share of transport in final energy consumption in Croatia is constantly increasing, and we are currently at 1/3 of final energy consumption in this sector. What is also important, and I'm sure in most of the countries the situation is somewhat similar, is that this final energy consumption in transport is of course dominated by fossil fuels in Croatia, specifically with diesel fuel, as you may see this light gray area, while this more darker gray area is gasoline. And when we look at the structure of the transport in Croatia by the mode, then this gray area is road transport. So road transport is really one area that is critical, not only for reducing energy consumption, but also for decarbonization targets. And then if we look at these road vehicles, here is another pie. Showing this brownish area is almost 2/3 of energy consumption of road vehicles is for cars. For cars, while this red one is light duty vehicles, and dark green is heavy duty vehicles, while blue is for buses. So clearly we are dominated, our transport is dominated by road transport, and specifically by cars. And when you take into account that that is 1/3 of our final energy consumption, and that we have targets set in NECP based on Article 4 of EED 3 to reduce final energy consumption. Then it's clear that this 1/3 of final energy consumption must be tackled with strong policy measures. But not only EED requirements are relevant for transport sector, we also have renewable targets. And in this other graph, you may see renewable targets in transport according to our updated NECP with yellow area focusing on increasing share of electricity in the transport fuel mix. So and you see how steep this shares, how steep increase of these shares if we want to achieve target in 2030. So the targets are not easy at all, and that's why in updated NECP we do have a set of several transport measures that are under dimension of decarbonization, so not energy efficiency but decarbonization, and these are focusing on specific modes of transport and are basically packages of different kinds of measures. But today we focus on this red marked measure related to subsidy program for purchase of new vehicles and development of infrastructure for the use of alternative fuels in road transport. Sorry for the typo. And this subsidy program is or has already been in place, as I said in introduction, in one way or the other since 2014-15. But the latest version, let's say, of this subsidy program for electric vehicles has these main features. It is implemented by our Environmental Protection and Energy Efficiency Fund, which actually pre-selects car dealers that are on voluntary basis join this program, stating places where cars can be purchased or vehicles can be purchased and types of vehicles they offer. So the citizens or other persons like companies, whoever apply to the call can go to the dealership and state and place their request for car and request for subsidy. The financing for this is secured dominantly from funds collected from EU ETS scheme, but also there is a special charge for motor vehicles. When you register your vehicle, then you pay this special charge, and it is collected by our Energy Efficiency Fund. The fund announces public calls in 2024. The last public call was in spring, and it was aimed only to citizens, but there in some specific calls or years, legal persons can also apply to the to this call, and you get the subsidy based on proof of payment, based on technical specification of your vehicle, and based on your traffic license. So first you purchase the vehicle, and then you get the subsidy. And subsidized technologies are electric vehicles, which need to have, of course, declared emissions of 0 grams per kilometer, which is true for electric vehicles. And it has to be maybe also emphasized that not only cars, but also vehicles in L group, L category are subsidized, and these are 2-wheel, 3-wheel, or 4-wheel vehicles, but lighter, smaller than what we usually consider cars. Apart for strictly electric vehicles, also plug-in hybrid vehicles are subsidized, and they need to prove that their emission is less than 50 grams per kilometer. And plug-in hybrids, of course, only for car, that is M1 category. So financial features of this program are shown here in this table. Usually, annually, there is about 15 million euro for this subsidy scheme. At least it was that in 2022 and 2024. You can get up to 40% of the value of your car as a subsidy, but maximal subsidies are prescribed and show in this table. And also, this is a novelty from this year, is that maximal vehicle price for which you can get subsidy is 50,000 euros. So it was like well, let's say the state does not want to subsidize luxury, so that's why this was put in place. But maybe it could also have something to do with the size of the vehicle. So, in a nutshell, this is our subsidy program, and as I said, it ran also in the previous period, it will run in this period, and as you can see in previous period, so 2014 to 2020, it was also alternative measure, and from all savings, cumulative savings, that were achieved in this period by alternative measures, this kind of subsidy scheme only provided for 1.26% of these total achieved savings. Preliminary results for a 3-year period, 2021-2023, show even lower share of this scheme in total cumulative savings achieved, which is maybe also the consequence that we have very strong energy renovation of buildings programs that are much stronger in terms of achieved savings. But what is expected is that in the whole period, this scheme contributes with approximately 3% of cumulative savings or cumulative target for alternative measures in Croatia. So this is according to evaluation, ex-ante evaluations of contribution of different policies measures for Article 8 as per updated NECP. Yeah, and about the monitoring or calculating the impacts of program, how we calculated all these savings and shares is shown in this slide, and I will not go into much details because Sam already explained it. The principle is same as in Stream Save project, and yeah, based on specific fuel consumption and distance traveled, and in our ordinance on system for monitoring and verification of energy savings, there are also reference values prescribed for different types of vehicles. Maybe just to emphasize that when we calculate the effects of this alternative measure implemented by Energy Efficiency Fund, the assumption is that electric vehicle or plug-in electric vehicle, hybrid replaces gasoline car. So that is the assumption used. Yeah. So this is in a nutshell what is happening in Croatia. You see, or we see that impacts in terms of achieving the overall targets are rather small, but this is important measure, and it will continue to be implemented exactly because of the promotion of technology, and I would say because of the all renewable and decarbonization targets as well. But for reducing energy consumption in transport, some measures obviously to reverse that trend will need to be much stronger and put in place for the next period. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Vesna, thanks a lot for your presentation. I do not see any immediate questions. Again, if you have questions or if you come up with questions later, then just ask them in the chat. But I have a raised hand on camera from Jean-Sébastien. Please, Jean-Sébastien.
No, thanks. Hi, everybody. Thanks a lot, Vesna, for your presentation. Now, that's a quick clarification questions. You showed the graph about the distribution of savings per policy measure, and there is one where the program for electric vehicles is 3.1%. That's the last one, I think. That's the share in the expected savings for the whole period 2021-2030, correct?
Exactly. That's the so the alternative in that graph. Alternative measures are shown according to updated NECP, and that is the share in total cumulative target for alternative measures, which is half of total cumulative target for Croatia.
Yeah. Okay, so that's 3.1% of the alternative measures, not
exactly.
on the total.
Not on the total, but on the alternative. But as I said, it's half of the overall cumulative target according to Article 8.
And in the previous graph where it was 0.43%, that were all including the obligation scheme, or again?
No, again, only
the alternative measures.
Only alternative measures. Regarding obligation scheme, maybe just information that this kind of measures are rare. Very, very rare. There were some isolated, few, I think less than 5 cases that obligated parties reported replacement of vehicles, their vehicles with electric, and then in that cases it was like really replacement. They showed also proofs that they get rid of some old cars and bought new ones. So that's it, but very, very, very limited.
Thanks a lot, Vesna. That's all great.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you very much. Then we are looking forward for the last presentation of today, and this brings in the example from Hungary, and I would like to invite Armin Bohm to start his presentation. Please, Armin, start.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Armin Bohm. I work for the Hungarian Energy and Hungarian Energy and Public Regulatory Authority, Public Utility Regulatory Authority, and we still have common projects with them. I still have common projects with them, and nowadays I work for the Hungarian Mobility Development Agency and the Brussels-based Council of European Energy Regulators, involved in the implementation of energy-related policy measures in Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Armenia. And actually, that's, among others, that's why I really like ENSMOV Plus project, because I'm not only able to transfer knowledge home, but also to transfer these pieces of information to the Eastern Partnership projects. And today I have the opportunity to talk about the transport measures in EED Article 8 implementation in Hungary. And I would like to just a minute start with the electric bus procurement program in Hungary. We had schemes for this, and it's not surprising, of course, that there is a significant demand for full intensity support due to the high capex, due to the high prices of electric buses, and the operators who can contribute some own funds to purchase some buses can reduce costs through the EEOS, the Energy Efficiency Obligation Scheme in Hungary, but there are some obstacles which can hinder the easy access of these benefits. First of all, let's see the calculation method of the gross energy savings in case of early replacement. The blue line is the old bus, the green line is the new bus. And if I replace the bus before the end of its lifetime, so it means that it's an early replacement, I can count the savings between the old and the new bus. But after the early replacement period, I should take into consideration the market average. So my baseline becomes the market average, and this significantly reduces the amount of energy saving I can account in the EEOS. In practice, this means that I should gather some references from the producers, from the bus producers, which have the same, for example, passenger capacity or range or consumption than my old buses. And I should use it as a baseline in these measures. Another obstacle of accounting these energy savings is that if a bigger city changes its buses, changes its old buses into new electric ones, it is quite usual that the old buses are transferred into smaller, less wealthy towns. And sometimes these buses are retained as backups. You can pose the question, why? Don't operators trust on new electric buses, or are there any issues with the operations? And the answer is yes. And let me just show you one exact example of this issue. These electric buses are often produced, most of the cases produced with a diesel heater that activates below the temperature of approximately 8 degrees. In order not to decrease the kilometer range of the electric buses in winter time, And according to the test periods, according to the test actions we did during these pilot projects, we got a lot of feedback from the operators on these diesel heaters. First of all, they consume in a really cold winter day, they can consume 44 liters of diesel daily. It's approximately enough to run a diesel bus for, let's say, 100 kilometers. And this is only for the heating of one bus. And frequent breakdowns were reported by the operators, and these increased the maintenance costs and the down times as well. And as you can see in the picture I put here on the slide, it causes visible emissions. And just imagine you driving behind these electric 100% electric bus written on the back, and you just see smoke emitted from the back. I think it can undermine a lot of work we put into behavior campaign actions, and a lot of my friends, for example, ask me why the 100% electric buses emit smoke during winter period. So yeah, it's quite a huge issue regarding these buses. Yeah, and anyway, we have hydrogen bus pilot projects in Hungary too, and regarding hydrogen buses, there is no such problems because the fuel cells produce some waste heats, and we can use the waste heat to make the passenger space warm enough. So yeah, maybe I don't know. So maybe hydrogen can be the future or can be not, but that's the fact that this heating problem is not as significant concerning the hydrogen buses than concerning the electric buses. The other really important transport measure in Hungary is the intermodal transport. Let me just highlight some implementation challenges. We have a catalog of standardized energy efficiency measures in Hungary. Here, let's say the most important, the most popular measures are listed with detailed calculation methodologies. And we also have a measure in the catalog regarding intermodal transport. And I had the opportunity to talk about colleagues in the rail area, and they actually said that there are a few obstacles, there are quite a lot of obstacles which can hinder the accounting of these savings in the EEOS. For example, in the rail, there are slower border crossings, because just imagine if you're driving with a truck within the Schengen area, you don't have to stop, you don't have to wait. That's not the case. Mostly that's not the case regarding the rail transport. And of course, the bureaucracy is increased. There are more logistical and administrative processes in the rail transport. And of course, the upgrade of the technologies determines a lot the catalog of measures, because in the catalog of measures, the Energy Authority calculates or give reference numbers according to international standards references, for example, provided by the International Energy Agency. And for example, these specific fuel consumption values now for road transport is 0.89 megajoules per ton kilometer, but with the upgrade of the technology, it constantly changes. So these are dynamic factors, and these changes are thus have impact on the market too. We also had support schemes for electric cars, both for the residential sector and both for SMEs. And there were no scrappage mandates on these schemes. It means that the beneficiaries could hold their old cars, their old diesel or few conventional cars, and in this case, the calculation of final energy savings is not really easy. But we have a 3-year monitoring period, and in this monitoring period, the beneficiaries should add the number of kilometers. And we see that from the feedback, we see that the new electric cars are usually used rather for city driving. And if the beneficiary holds the old car, it is rather used for long-haul journeys to the countryside or to or abroad. We are planning to have kilometer-based monitoring on that, because the Commission, because according to the Commission, final energy savings is only achieved when there is no double use. Rather, we use the more efficient electric car instead of the old ones. And if we just monitor kilometer-based, the number of the kilometers from the electric car and from the old car, we can calculate an energy saving. But there are a few practical obstacles regarding this, because we have to prove that the given kilometers are really from this car. So, for example, a picture is not enough. A picture uploaded to the portal is not enough, because it's not proved enough that this car is the car of the beneficiary gained from the scheme. Now I had just that time, so thank you for your attention. Let's if you want to connect, let's scan this QR code. This drives you to my LinkedIn profile, and I'm really happy to answer your questions here. And if you don't want to pose the questions plenary, just text me directly via LinkedIn, and I will do my best to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Armin, for your perspective from an operational point of view. I don't see at the moment immediate questions, but we have one question to Sam in the Q&A section. And maybe, Sam, you can just, I think by now you had time to also read it.
And indeed answer it.
And
get a thumbs
maybe
up.
Even answer it. So maybe you just could summarize the question and then.
So the question is just about the. So I mentioned when I talked about the behavioural effects, that the rebound. I mentioned the rebound effect and said I wasn't going to deal with it, and of course that's a kind of that triggered a question, because why not? And I guess the answer to that question is I haven't actually studied what the empirical evidence on what the rebound effect is in the transport sector, particularly with respect to electric vehicle purchases. And the question that Joel asks is that here we have a kind of a halo effect, and the concern is that when you get EVs entering the transport system, then it sort of undermines the efforts to shift modes into public transport, cycling, etc. So and of course there's a standard rebound effect as well. So if you have a more efficient vehicle and therefore it's cheaper to run, then maybe you're just going to do more travel, and that's kind of a basic kind of economics behind the rebound effect. And well, my response was a little bit generic and blah blah, but it's basically, yeah, I mean, it does exist. It'd be interesting to learn more, and I don't know if anybody on this call in the audience has looked at the evidence, and if you're putting in place a comprehensive transport strategy where you are looking to shift modes, look to maybe reduce the need for people to drive while also encouraging electrification, particularly where the use of private vehicles is kind of unavoidable, then yeah, you should take it into account. And maybe there are particular places where you'd want to strengthen the modal shifting aspects of your transport strategy, but that's kind of obvious and a bit blah blah blah. But I think it's a good question and something that you should always be aware of and consider.
Okay, thank you. Maybe just one observation from my side, also based on my experience, is that sometimes it seems to me we are being more strict in the transport sector than in other sectors, because we have similar issues in the building sector, and there, of course, we have more experiences with standardized calculations. But I have the feeling sometimes that we don't go that much into detail in the building sector on all these single issues. So we are being a little bit more liberal, and maybe that's also one input that you could take home. just try it, of course, respecting the rules, but still not being stricter than in other areas. I have actually one question, because Sam mentioned in his presentation that one way of justifying savings would be by incentivizing the shift to lighter or smaller vehicles. And I'm wondering whether in any of your countries, in the participants' countries, there are such schemes that directly target this shift to lighter vehicles. I mean, some of us have these tax schemes, but maybe there are other schemes as well. So if there are any, please feel free.
I mean, one thing I should mention while people are thinking about that is the Norwegian taxation scheme that I mentioned is actually, it's weighted, it's got like 4 variables in the tax, the vehicle purchase tax in Norway. And so it's not just based on the CO2 emissions, there's also a local air pollution element to it, and there's also a weight base. So in Norway, you've got this quite complicated system of taxation where the level of taxation is weighted by all these different factors. So it does, in fact, in Norway, you know, they've set up a scheme where if you purchase a light electric vehicle, you're going to be paying less tax than if you purchase a heavy SUV electric vehicle, for example. So there is an example in Norway. And I'm pretty sure that every country that has a vehicle registration tax, or maybe there's an annual tax that you have to pay in order to run your vehicle on the road, you know, in all of these countries, there would be the option to vary the tax according to the weight of the vehicle.
Okay. So I don't see any hands raised or comments in the chat. Just one thing, maybe not all of you read it. In Ireland, there at the moment, Joel was mentioning that they are looking into the rebound effect for EV vehicles. So maybe we can also keep the audience updated on this analysis when it will be published. But other than that, at the moment, I don't see any comments or questions. Jean-Sébastien, please.
No, but no, Günther is first. He raised his hand.
Yeah, he just raised his hand. Okay, please, Günther.
Can you hear me? Günther speaking.
Yes.
Perfect. Very small question to the formula. There is also the possibility for the user behavior. Is there a study within the European Union where the user behavior was analyzed? Thank you very much.
Well, in all the EU, I don't expect that. I mean, I also think this factor contains quite a lot of things, right? Different aspects of user behavior. But at the moment, we don't see anyone raising his hand on that. Okay, there's still a lot of things to think about, but Jean-Sébastien, you also wanted to say something.
Well, about that question, maybe we can check in the proceedings of the Behave conference. There might be that there have been probably several sessions on transport over the years, so this might provide some insight. But it also depends on what aspect of user behaviors you refer to. No, just before continuing the discussion, 2 quick information. So first, Axel put in the chat a link for the feedback survey. So please take a few minutes. That's super quick and that's very useful for us. So before you leave, don't forget to open this link and quickly answer that. The next workshop of the project will likely be in December on energy savings potentials. That will not be strictly focused on transport, but I'm quite sure that to some extent we will mention transport in this workshop as well. And the provisional date is Tuesday, 17 December. We hope to be able to confirm that very soon. Maybe the point on the discussion is from the 3 of you, what you presented is, and maybe that's also related to what you said, Gregor, that we may consider more factors when assessing transport measures and building measures, for example. But we saw from the example, Armin, you presented on buses, that I guess that in the calculation, then you need to consider the consumptions of the isolators. So when you start looking at it, then you learn more things, and you need to include more parameters. And you mentioned also the difficulty to get data on travel distances, distance traveled. Sorry. So maybe the question is, how do you see the possibility to simplify the calculation for when reporting energy savings from transport, so that it's still reliable, but you don't enter into too complex or even philosophical, some would say, questions? I don't know who want to go first on that.
I think that would be a very good thing to think about, because again, I think we are living with many uncertainties and other factors when calculating the effects of building measures. Just because we are used to using standardized methods, I think, over the past 20 years, and we accept that we are assuming a user behavior, we are assuming a room temperature, knowing that none of this is correct, of course, in a single case. So I think there's definitely potential for that. And maybe one remark, another remark is that Sam was very busy posting studies on the rebound effect in the transport sector. So you can find this in the chat. And then we actually have a question to Sam in the chat. Have you seen any policies in the NSRPs that address the increasing car size in the EU, which cancel out many of the energy efficiency improvements? So this is actually another factor, kind of a rebound factor, but were there policies in the NSRPs that were targeting that?
No, I mean, is it rebound? I mean, I think basically there's just a general thrust in the car market, right, towards bigger vehicles, whether they're internal combustion engines or electric vehicles. It just seems that personal preferences, and presumably also driven partly by the profit margins of the vehicle manufacturers. But anyway, whatever the reasons, people are buying bigger cars. Now, I have not seen anything in the NECPRs that is specifically addressing this scheme, But these weight-based taxation, vehicle taxation measures do seem like a really good candidate. And yeah, so Jean-Sébastien has mentioned the bonus-malus scheme in France, which, yeah, I'm not sure whether that does vary. I mean, but all of these types of schemes can include a weight variable in them if they want, and they could therefore be reported for the purposes of Article 8 EED. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that these policy measures don't exist, but they're just not being reported to ED energy savings obligation, because either the Energy Department doesn't know what the Transport Department does, so this is Gregor's original point, or maybe it just seems like it's too difficult to work out what the impacts are. Maybe they don't think they're eligible because actually the rationale for the policy isn't to save energy. I mean, one example might be parking restrictions. So, you know, we all know anyone that's walked around a city or tried to use a car park or parking space, and you find suddenly there's this huge, you know, tractor-sized SUV that is taking up more than one parking space. You know, that's an issue for other people looking to use that space. And I mean, I haven't tracked it, but I can imagine that there are local authorities, for example, or it could be a national authority, that are taking specific measures to penalize drivers of bigger vehicles that are essentially reducing the welfare of other people in their local area by taking up more space. So my feeling is that there aren't measures that are being reported, but there are probably measures that could be, and there's definitely the scope for measures to be adapted so that they actually save energy and then could be reported to the energy savings obligation. I mean, the policy measure in France that Jean-Sébastien mentioned is that France, in a way, doesn't need to report policy measures like this when its white certificate program is so huge that it's able to more than cover the energy savings that need to be reported for the purposes of Article 8. I think if France didn't have such a big white certificate scheme, they'd probably be looking for these other policy measures as energy efficiency, or at least partly about energy efficiency, and then reporting them.
Thank you. And maybe another point on these taxation or bonus-malus systems is also, are you penalizing the purchase of the vehicle or the use? Because I also think this could play quite a role. Because I think we in Austria, we have since a long time, we have the purchase, let's say, penalty. You just pay a higher tax when purchasing a vehicle, but that's actually not the main screw to motivate people to buy smaller vehicles. Probably it would be rather the use. But yeah, that's also might also be an issue that might change in this actual period, in the current period, that member states will just look more into different kinds of measure that they didn't think before to report for Article 7.8. Okay. There was some small discussion going on in the chat, but I don't think there were really questions. Jean-Sébastien, any?
Yeah, no, that's just referring to the MUR
bonus-malus. No.
More in general. Yeah, because as Sam said, the share of transport measures that are reported to Article 8 is rather small compared to the whole transport measures that countries implement. And you can find definitely more examples of transport measures in the MUR database, even if, again, that will not be comprehensive for transport measures because the MUR is focused on energy efficiency. So as Lucas said in the chat, if you are looking at resource efficiency, there might be other measures that will not be included in MUR in that case.
Okay. Well, as we do not have immediate questions here, my dog is wanting to go for a walk, it seems. Yeah, I would like to thank you all for your participation, and I would like to give the last words to Jean-Sébastien.
Yes, so thanks a lot to you, Gregor, for setting up this workshop, and thanks to Sam, Vesna, and Armin for the very interesting presentation. Everything will be put on the platform, so you have the link at the beginning in the chat today. So you will find the presentation files, and we will prepare also some minutes. You can follow the project on LinkedIn if you check for ENSMOV Plus on LinkedIn, and this way you will get the announcement when the next workshop will be set up about energy savings potential. And then next year we will continue in January also with a workshop on energy poverty, most probably. So there are many interesting things to come.
Thank you very much. So having said that, I would like to thank you for your participation and wish you a very nice day.